It is a gorgeous spring day in Iqaluit. Clear blue skies, a balmy 12 degrees Celsius. No snow today, so those sled dogs you hear off in the distance are taking it easy. And that's a boat pulling up to the new deep sea port where Inuit fishers are bringing in their hauls of Arctic char.
Here in Iqaluit, we are looking at some of the most ideal conditions that we strive and long for, and the influx of migratory mammals and birds and the influx of life with 24-hour daylight and sunlight really create the conditions that we long for in our tradition, in our practice, in our culture. I am an active hunter practicing our harvesting rights within Nunavut to be able to maintain our traditional practices and the ability for me to provide to our family for subsistence.
Neil Kigutaq grew up north of here 4 hours by plane in Arctic Bay. His people, the Inuit, have lived and hunted in Nunavut for millennia. They know this land like the back of their hands, which is why Neil has the job he does.
I'm a Master Corporal for the 1st Canadian Ranger Patrol Group here in Iqaluit.
Neil is a Canadian Ranger, a member of the Canadian Army Reserve, which serves in remote, isolated, and coastal regions, including in the north.
When the World War ended, there was a huge demand for maintaining a military presence and maintaining sovereignty in the Arctic. So when you look back thousands of years, these acquired skills that we have, this traditional approach has provided practices for us to continue to be mobile. It forces us to be active, to be out, to be able to keep an eye on how all of our environment and the wildlife and the ecosystems that are revolving around that.
Search and rescue and disaster relief are a couple of Neil's responsibilities. So is surveillance, making sure no foreign power is on Canadian land, making sure no one is crossing lines.
When we talk about our contribution as members, we are very proud every single time we hear Canada's national anthem and that statement about our true north, strong and free. That is one of the most uplifting and historical statements that exemplifies what Inuit in the Arctic bring. We are very patriotic and proud of who we are and how we contribute.
In remote areas, often under harsh conditions, the Rangers stand on guard for thee, which makes them unique. Canada is not a hugely militarized country. Canada has not been a country where you tend to see a lot of soldiers. But that may be about to change. Welcome to Gloves Off, a podcast about the threat to Canada's sovereignty and what we can do about it. I'm Stephen Marche. Today's question: how do we defend ourselves? For most other countries in the world, the military is the key to national identity. For older countries like England or Spain, their armies and navies go back into the mists of time. At his coronation, King Charles wore a ruby in his crown that Henry V wore in the Battle of Agincourt in 1415. For newer countries, products of the 19th century like Germany and Italy, strong militaries were a basic requirement for nation building, both practically and symbolically. They came to exist as countries because they built strong militaries. Canada's immense good fortune is that we haven't really needed a strong military to build our country. In the War of 1812, we were British, and the British kept us alive because we were British. There hasn't been an attack on our homeland since. Confederation, the founding of the country, was the result of a political negotiation rather than a conquest or a violent independence movement. Our geography has blessed us. With 2 oceans on either side, the Arctic to the north, and a friend and ally to the south, we haven't really needed to think or to talk about war at home all that much. Our military was based on a fundamental assumption about our place in the world and the nature of the world itself. Our place in the world was to contribute to the global order. The global order shared our fundamental values. Peacekeeping has always been more our style than out-and-out war. But that's all changed now. The world is heating. The North is thawing. The South is melting. The most basic question a country has to ask itself is the one we're facing now. How do we not get overtaken? And not only do we have to answer that question, we have to answer it at the highest level. If the United States is an opponent, then we stand opposed to the greatest military force the world has ever known. And without America as our protector, we are vulnerable not just to them, but to everybody else, to Russia, to China, to anybody. So what does Canada need to do to reach the minimum requirement of any country's existence, to possess the capacity to defend itself? In episode 2, we spoke to Philippe Lagacé, a professor of international affairs at Carleton University, about Canada's readiness. He gave us a C, with room to grow to a B, if we could address an aging fleet and recruitment and retention issues. Today, we're going to talk to retired Major General Scott Clancy, who has been more directly involved in Canada's military and, in particular, with its connection to the United States military. He ended his career as Canadian Deputy for NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, headquartered in Colorado Springs, Colorado. That is perhaps our closest and most necessary military alliance for collective missile defense. What are Canada's main military weaknesses right now?
First one is it's all about the away game. We fight our adversaries somewhere else, and that has allowed continental defense to just wane. It wanes in Canada's, and it creates a perception as it pertains to military operations from the average Canadian that I can only characterize as apathy. We've never seen more dialogue concerning what Canada needs to do until the United States president said, you should be the 51st state.
Right.
So if that's the case, focused on the away game, our military forces are focused on expeditionary operations, focused on contributing to coalitions. The Canadian military is just too small, and it doesn't own all of the integrators to develop complete capabilities to be able to go it alone in almost any of these operational theaters. There are no battle plans. There is no, if you talk to the Germans or the French or any of the other NATO countries and say, if we're the only one under attack, are you coming to our aid? They will laugh at you. What? The two imperatives are, you must defend Canada, you must defend North America, and everything else is a choice.
Did you just tell me that there are no battle plans in existence to protect Canada? Is that what I just heard?
Not from NATO. NATO is focused on the defense of Europe because that's where the threat is.
What's the first priority here?
I think the first move needs to be, you need to refocus and reorganize the Canadian Armed Forces to focus on the defense of Canada first and not our other allies. I think the Arctic's kind of part and parcel with that. And I think that fundamental reorientation will bring you to the Arctic first. It'll also talk about the border. It'll talk about our coastlines, especially. We're tied to the United States' defense industry intimately. We don't have a defense industrial base. That has to change. So you're going to have to change the supply chain, which means, but incrementally, don't do it overnight, because canceling the F-35 contract is going to change anything in the short term, and it's just going to make us more vulnerable in that short term. But over time, you're going to have to diversify that defense industry away from the United States.
I have not been speaking to people as integrated into the military as you. The people I've been speaking to are consultant class, which is obviously a very different thing. But what they're worried about is that the interoperability that we've had with U.S. military forces, it creates a complacency within the military where people, there's sort of a desperate urge to go back to why can't we just get all go along, and actually getting that out of the military will be extremely difficult. How do we get to a point of being safe in that way militarily?
For Canada to confront the Americans, it's got to be will. It's going to be a will to do the things that you have to do. And we're talking about a national will. We see nothing that has unified Canadian national spirit than this affront to our sovereignty from the United States. I would argue ever, at least since World War II.
I've never seen anything like it.
Right?
Let's start with NORAD and the state of our nuclear umbrella and what you think we should do with it. Like, you're the former director of NORAD. Like, do you think that relationship is now really at least challenged?
What does Canada have to do? What does NORAD look like militarily if we're under this increasingly hostile peace? Yeah. If NORAD goes away tomorrow, those two imperatives, you must defend Canada, you must defend North America, are not going to go away because you're now out of NORAD, because the relationship with the United States has hit this little bit of rocky edge. The reality is geography and shared values, for the most part, throw us together.
Should we be developing our own nuclear weapons? Is that a sensible decision for Canada?
So no. But the most important part is to say why, right? Because we'd be setting it off on Canadian soil. Like it doesn't make any sense, to me.
Okay, now we've talked to a bunch of people who say things like conscription's a good idea. I would like you to talk me through how you imagine conscription in Canada working and also, I guess, why it would be good and why it would give us better defense capabilities.
I don't think that the word conscription is the word that I would use. I would use universal service. Okay. And the reason why I make a difference is conscription, even in history, is tied directly to uniquely military service. I'll take a page from the Germans, I'll take a page from the Finns, I'll take a page from the Norwegians. Universal service, I believe, should be in three specific areas. First one is healthcare. Mm-hmm. Second one is we have an infrastructure problem in Canada. We have so much national infrastructure that must be built. And then the third one is military service. You have to have a robust plan to defend Canada against all adversaries, including the United States. And state it categorically. You bet. We have defense plans to fight against you. And they will be comprehensive. That's going to take a certain amount of tact, and it's going to take a certain amount of maturity to do. Notice I didn't say all focused on defeating the Americans. No. As being a good, solid defense partner.
It seems to me like you're saying two things. Like, one thing is we need to get more independent. We need to have our own bases in the North. We need to possibly have conscription in which we're specifically trained on basics of medical and infrastructural and military techniques where we would be prepared against the United States. But at the same time, we should be good friends with the United States. Like, I guess what I'm saying is that a contradiction? Or are you saying both of those things are complementary and that we have to do both at the same time?
Can those two ideas exist at the same time in the same place? Well, sure. Yeah, we're not just going to roll over and be the 51st states. I think that we're going to get over that. But that doesn't mean we're going back to where we were before. So this goes back to, we're going to be a good ally. We're good allies. We're strong. We do our things. We're Canadian. We believe in our own sovereignty. We do things right. We deal with you straightforward in the way in which we're dealing with that. That's what you want from a good ally. If that's not going to be enough for you as an ally, then that relationship in that instant is going to deteriorate.
So we need more hard power, in a sense, to be better friends.
Absolutely.
Right. Can you just give me a primer on the North and like our situation there, what our weaknesses there, what our strengths are?
So first thing is presence. You're going to have a permanent presence in the North. And it's not just, hey, we're opening up a Iqaluit and we're going to have one base there. You're going to have significant bases of Canadian military across. You're going to have northern ports, and you have to have an ability to power project. You're going to have a military base up at Alert that's going to have to be expanded, and it's going to have to be comprehensive. And you're going to have to go there all the time. Right. And that's not just about military personnel. It's more about dual purpose infrastructure. All of the communities that are around the North, all of the things that you need to operate in the North have to be there. If you have a 5G network that works in this area and it's the best Wi-Fi in the world, then, wow, so I can go up there and operate? Yes. But if it costs you $25 for a loaf of bread, then because the cost of just doing things is exorbitant. You're going to have to fix that. You fix those things, that civilian dual purpose infrastructure, you lay the foundations for it, then companies will invest, people will be there, and you'll be able to do that. And with your military presence from a permanent basis, you do those two things together. The national will needs to be behind this.
Up in Iqaluit, Master Corporal Neil Kigutaq of the 1st Canadian Ranger Patrol Group would like to see the conversation of what's needed up north go beyond just infrastructure.
If we are going to expand on the operations that we have dedicated decades of our families' inherent responsibilities into this structure, you can only do that through collaboration with Inuit. The reasons why these opportunities have been so successful and plentiful, and the transfer of knowledge between other military branches about surviving in these conditions are based on Inuit knowledge and Inuit history and our accumulated knowledge.
It's just as much about fostering a closer relationship between two partners.
It's an exciting time to be able to be not just recognized for the contributions and the work we've done, but to see opportunities in the future where we will anticipate more collaborations with our brothers and sisters in the national military structure, to be able to spend more time in our environments, to work more on a first name basis and see dedication and resources be made through our relationship, having Inuit involvement in that process.
Neil is right in at least one way. The Canadian military is about to get much larger and much more connected. As Scott Clancy said, we need to move from plug and play with the Americans to military independence. It would be one of the most substantial transitions in the history of this country. There are basically two ways to defend yourself from an insane neighbor who is vastly more powerful than you. The first is nuclear weapons. We're going to put that question to one side. It's a moral question, and it would require a national referendum. But what are we supposed to do otherwise? What else can we do to prevent being taken at will? Finland is a country that has thought a great deal about how not to be conquered. It has lived its entire existence next to a belligerent monster country that is either expanding imperially or collapsing dangerously. The Finns do not have nuclear weapons. They are also only 5.5 million people, next to Russia's 143 million. Their strategy is known as whole society defense. They have posted a manual online for their population which explains it.
Miten toimin? Häiriö- ja kriisitilanteisiin varautuminen. Tiedätkö, miten varaudut?
Preparedness means preparing for various incidents and crises and emergency conditions in advance.
It's part of the national preparedness system where, as a government officials, they encourage individual Finns to make sure that they are personally prepared for a potential crisis or even war.
Matti Pesu is a senior research fellow at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs.
In terms of like food, medicine, cash, just the stuff that you need for your everyday. And we've had this system for decades, but now there's just a new website and a new round of like information campaign to make sure that there is a sufficient awareness in the society.
Can you tell me, like, first of all, when did they begin?
The whole total defense or comprehensive security system dates back to Cold War, and the idea of encouraging citizens to get ready and prepare, that dates back to 1960s. Now there's just been much more focus on preparedness matters, and it has to do with the ongoing war in Ukraine. Let's say the overarching recommendation is that every citizen should be capable of surviving 72 hours without support from the state.
I found very interesting how, we often think of populations preparing for war as conscription, like as some kind of like militarization of the population. But this was in fact a much broader set of instructions, first aid, emergency preparedness, and so on. I guess, is this a preparation for resistance to a Russian invasion, or is it something different than that?
It's not only related to war and military conflict. Like a natural catastrophe, such as like a storm or a flood, could potentially bring about similar problems.
We're not used to this. We don't have an intellectual tradition of thinking about it. We don't have a military tradition of thinking about it. And I mean, we're trying to learn, part of what this show is about learning from other places about who have been in these situations for a lot longer and have thought about it a lot more, like what we should be thinking about and what advice Finland would have for living next to a country that is much larger and can fall into authoritarianism pretty easily.
The power asymmetry is an absolutely essential factor in the Finnish security thinking. And given how much bigger Russia is, there's been an understanding in Finland that in order to thwart that potential threat, we need to mobilize broadly the resources available in the society. It's not only about military capabilities and military force. It's about other tools and factors as well. The society needs to. It's a whole of government approach. That's the word we use in our security lingo.
Is that different from whole of society defense? Because that's the phrase that I've been hearing.
Yeah, it's the same.
Okay.
So in that scenario, full societal resources of a smaller nation can actually be enough to thwart the potential threat from a larger power, because the costs for the larger power to invade or to carry out an aggressor could actually be much higher than the potential benefits it would gain from such a invasion.
I really want as much detail as possible about what this looks like. Like what is it as a policy? How is it implemented? Who does it affect? And just tell me how it works. As a security strategy, how does it work?
Conscription is really just in terms of military defense and in terms of producing deterrence and also sufficient defense capabilities. You really need to have the significant part of the population involved. So that's the key in the system.
Maanpuolustus kuuluu kaikille.
National defense belongs to everyone. For individuals, maintaining defense means, for instance, the will to defend the country, the will to take care of Finnish society and participate in its activities. All Finnish citizens have a national defense obligation, and everyone plays an important role in defending Finland.
Every official entity and authority, they have their own role in a security system, be it healthcare providers or the Finnish broadcasting company or every ministry, safe and rescue people. So they know what their role in a military conflict would be. And the officials, because of the culture of preparedness and the flexible nature of a small nation, it's about a preparedness mindset that permeates the whole society from the state level and ideally all the way to an individual Finn living somewhere in the country.
What is your role in this structure?
So I'm a commander of an armored personal carrier, and that would be my wartime role, unless the military one wants me to do something else.
Tell me about conscription then. I mean, can you describe what it's typically like and what your experience was like?
The experience was fine. So the system is that it's obligatory for the male population, and then there's also non-military service option available, and then it's voluntary for women. It's done right after you graduate from the high school or from vocational training. It takes half a year or 9 months or a year. I think most of the conscripts see it as a positive experience. It is also socially a very interesting a system, because it tends to even out certain differences when it comes to your socioeconomic situation. And when you're wearing the camo, you're like everyone else. So it brings a strong democratic linkage between the armed forces and a state, and makes the defense forces very embedded in the society. So Their armed forces are close to every Finn, and it's not seen as a sort of like a distant machine operating somewhere else.
Right. Could you talk about what it does to the military?
The wartime strength of the Finnish armed forces are almost 300,000, and the whole reserve is close to 1 million, and the country has 5.6 million inhabitants. So it is really like a key tool for producing the military force we need for national defense.
Let's say, like, knock on wood, worst case scenario, call comes that Russia's about to invade, Finland along with a bunch of other places. What happens?
Well, first it would be a massive intelligence failure for our military intelligence if they fail to give a decent early warning. But then, should something like this happen, so Finland would have enough like standing forces to engage in early fighting, and then the military force would initiate the mobilization system, calling people into arms. So for me personally, it would be interesting to know if the defense forces wanted me to serve in my role as a commander of an armored personnel carrier or do something else. But you need a sufficient early warning in order to mobilize society, because getting potentially hundreds of thousands of troops into arms won't happen with a snap of a finger. So it takes time, days and even weeks or months. So that's why having an early warning is a must.
Canada has recently announced serious boosts to its military spending. 2% by the end of this year, rising to 5% at some point in the future. But the government has pushed its readiness targets back to 2032. And those are targets that align with our typical military practices, fulfilling our commitments to our alliances. That money sounds good on a theoretical level, but the Canadian military situation has not fundamentally altered. We have not reset our position. Canada, despite the national reaction to the threat of annexation, has no plans for a whole society defense. And on one level, I just don't understand why. Many countries have some version of whole society defense, whether it's called conscription or universal service or whatever. They are countries that share our values, countries like Finland and Denmark and Japan and Korea. Whole society defense has obvious benefits, well beyond national self-protection. It would provide us with a force to deal with the increasing environmental threats the country faces, for one thing. The main point of a whole society defense is not to be able to beat your psycho neighbor. The point is to make it painful for them to beat you. And we aren't making our conquest any more painful right now. Canada has no plans for nuclear armament either. Economic reorganization is well underway. The boycotts and travel bans have been effective. Why aren't we changing the military? The answer is that we can't quite bring ourselves to believe that we need to change. There is a common assumption, a widespread assumption, that the American madness is going to end at worst in 4 years and probably sooner, by the midterms, or for the insanely optimistic, in 6 months when Trump has calmed down. Reconfiguring the Canadian military seems like a ridiculous wager if you believe that. The question is who is driving the bus off the cliff, Trump or the American people? There can be a debate around that. I believe firmly that it is the American people, but there can be a debate. Either way, the period we are entering is a period of deep chaos, of the weakening of international institutions, of multiple interlocked collapses. Any reliance on those institutions and their restoration is a false hope. If we are to remain a stable democracy, we will have to find the stability in ourselves. A whole society defense would defend us against the chaos that threatens us from every side and from within. Canada is a big country with huge geographical and demographic diversity. We are as vulnerable as any other society to the informational chaos that is overtaking the world, to the incipient breakdown. A whole society defense would be a massive force for unification. It would establish, to Canadians at least, that there are crises we are going to have to face and we need to face them collectively. The thing about a whole society defense is that it determines that you are living in a whole society, a society that needs defending. But as I said at the beginning of the show, Canada has no history of needing to defend itself. In fact, not needing a military is baked into our national identity, and that creates a psychological bind. To preserve who we are, we have to overcome one of our oldest tendencies, one of our best tendencies, our peace-loving nature, our idea of our country as an escape from history, rather than a perpetrator or a victim of history. And that leads to a very scary question. What will be the crisis that makes us realize that we need whole society defense? Let's hope it won't be Canada's last crisis. Next episode, we're going to look at what happens if Canada's military doesn't put up a fight. What happens if Canada were actually to be annexed by force, the nightmare scenario? What would a Canadian insurgency look like? This is Gloves Off, a podcast about how Canada can survive the American threat and what we can do about it. Available wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Stephen Marche. Thank you for listening.
The old relationship we had with the United States is over. Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves.
The true north is indeed strong and free.
Oh, Canada, 51st state. 51st state.
Jobs, and free.
People of Canada like it.
Maybe I'm Ranger state.
And we have a fight.